BookTube. I'm here with the second half of the wrap-up books that I haven't wrapped up yet. I'm just going to show you my shirt because it annoys me when people wear shirts with words and you can't read the whole thing. So it says, "Sorry, I can't. I have plans with my cat." I love this shirt. My cat was lying there a few minutes ago. I don't know where he is now. He has plans without me. That's the way it always is, isn't it? So I'm just here to wrap up 11 books from June to August. Yes, that's what the list is dated as, June to August. I'm just going to hop right on into it. So, God's Secretaries, The Making of the King James Bible by Adam Nicolson. It was okay. I gave it a 2.5 out of 5 stars. I felt it was more... And I guess my expectations and what I wanted out of it wasn't what the book was about. And that's why it was so kind of disappointing. It was more a biography of the people who contributed to the Bible. That version of the Bible, the KJV. Instead of how the Bible was changed and the implications of that, and a more thorough examination of the KJV outside of the people, or what their influences brought to the Bible, that version of the Bible. Yeah. It just didn't give me what I wanted, and that's my own fault for not looking too closely at the description, obviously. So yeah, it's still okay. Yeah, that's an interesting thing that happens. You know, like if you go into a book, especially nonfiction, thinking that it's going to be a certain thing, and then it's not that thing, how does that affect your rating? Because I maybe if I had gone into this knowing and wanting biographies of the men as opposed to more information about the Bible version, would have been better, but it is what it is. Okay, another book that expectations versus reality, and it's my own fault again too. I love the Murdoch Mysteries TV series. I'm currently on I haven't finished season 16. That's the current season right now. I'm part way through it, so like no spoilers. I'm just working my way through it slowly. I want to watch the new spin-off Macy Murdoch as well. So like I love the series. I love the TV series, and I thought it's funny time that I read the books that it's based off of, right? So the first book is called Accept the Dying by Maureen Jennings, and it's not the TV show. That's all I'm gonna say. It's a historical mystery. We follow this detective who doesn't look at all like his name's escaping me, Yannick Bassoon, and George Crabtree's married and has a mustache. No way. I like the characters on the TV show better than in the book. I'm thankful for the book for inspiring the TV show, but yeah, it's a historical mystery. Not much to say about it. Then I read Brown Girl in the Ring by Nalo Hopkinson. So this is about Toronto has kind of become dystopian. All the economic sector has left, and all the rich people have left, and it's kind of like barred off. It's mostly ruled by this one dude who has powers that involve like Caribbean magic and beliefs and stuff like that. So yeah, he has a strong grip on it, and there's this drug that he's kind of pushing to people. And then we have this overarching story about like organ donations and the ethical dilemmas between using animal organs versus getting it from humans. Yeah, so it's a really interesting story, and we follow this young girl. She's just had a baby, and she's just trying to live her life, but you know, things happen as they always do. Yeah, it's a really interesting look at immigration, like immigrant. She's a second second or third generation immigrant, but her grandmother that she lives with has ties to like Caribbean folklore and magic and religion and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting seeing that aspect of it. As you can tell, I didn't prepare any notes or anything for these. I'm just kind of going off the top of my head what I can remember and my thoughts on it. So I thoroughly enjoyed it, actually. What did I give it? 4.5 stars. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And then I read The Bible, a Biography by Karen Armstrong. I love Karen Armstrong. She's a Bible historian, or religion historian in general. She doesn't just talk about Christianity, she talks about Judaism and Islam too. I have tons of her books on my shelves. I'm looking over here because that's where my religion section used to be, but now all my shelves are jumbled. So, she used to be there, but now she's not. Yeah, so this is how the Bible was created. This is what I was looking for from the King James version, King James book thing that I read. It was more about like how things were changed and why they were changed and the cultural impact of that. Talking also a lot about Judaism as well, because that's like a big chunk of the Bible. It's the Old Testament. Yeah, I still have it on my shelves here because there's lots of notes in there that I want to use for another book video. So yeah, I'm just gonna pull it out and here it is. I'm just gonna pull open a random tab and read it because I like doing that. If religious people felt embattled by the 20th century, that is because they were indeed under attack. Jews were impelled by new scientific racism, which defined the essential biological and genetic characteristics of the peoples of Europe so narrowly that the Jew became other. Yeah, so that's about the Holocaust. How that affected the Bible. The Torah was no longer confined to the celestial world. Once it had been promulgated on Mount Sinai, it no longer belonged to God, but was the inalienable possession of every single Jew. Yeah, so it's really interesting. Look at the Bible. I also read another book about the Bible. So that's it's called Jesus, the Bible, and Homosexuality by Jacques Rogers. And so this is talking about his own personal experience, and it's very confined to his specific sect of Christianity. I can't remember what sect it was, but he did talk about larger points too. He just talked about like the different church doctrines and the government of the church as well, and how this question of whether first of all whether homosexual people should be accepted into the church, and then whether they could be ordained within the church as well. So that was that section, but he talked a lot about Christianity in general and homosexuality, and it was really interesting. I have a video coming up about that. His ultimate argument, in case you didn't guess, is I feel it's like I shouldn't even have to say pro homosexuality. It is accepting of homosexuality, and not just accepting but affirming. That's what I'm looking for. Affirming of homosexuality. Yeah, so watch out for that video. Then I read Wittgenstein Elegies by Jan Zwicky. And so Wittgenstein was a philosopher. His primary idea was about solipsism. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about his philosophy because this isn't about him. So Jan Zwicky went to school to study philosophy, and she realized that what she was reading wasn't what the teachers were teaching. So she took her own approach and she wrote a series of poems about Wittgenstein and his philosophy. That's what that was. It was quite interesting. I do have an interest in Wittgenstein. I haven't read his philosophies, but like the theological, philosophica, whatever it's called, because it's kind of intimidating, but I have read about his philosophy. That makes sense. Yeah, so there's that. Then I've read a lot of religious books. I read God by Jocelyn R. Zichterman, and this is about IBLP. If you've seen the documentary on Prime called Shiny Happy People, if you know about the Duggars, they are IBLP. So it's a Christian cult that has to do, mostly the primary abuse factor has to do with the umbrella of authority, in that there's God, and then in this thing, it doesn't say it directly, but Bob Gothard, and then they protect, overarching this, they protect the family, and the family is protected by the father. So it's about control and abuse, and it's quite interesting. So what I really liked about this is that she took her own personal experiences. Growing up, she got married, and then her and her husband left the church after having like 8 kids already. It's also about being quiverful, which means having as many kids as you can. That's why the Duggars have 19 kids. But it also allows for abuse to fester in this environment, because there's not a lot of checks and balances going on, right? So she talks about her own personal experience, and then she expounds upon that within the church and the larger worldview as well. So each of the chapters began with the personal and then went into like the bigger picture. It was really quite interesting. I know a lot about IBLP because I have been interested in it started with the Duggars, obviously, being on the TV. They had the 19 Kids and Counting TV show. Being interested in them, and then getting more interested in fundamentalism. Not as in joining fundamentalism, but as in like learning about it as a cult. Yeah, so that was an interesting book. Then I read The Coldest Winter Ever by Sister Souljah. I'd seen this a few people's channels on BookTube and decided to finally pick it up. It was really cool. I really liked her writing. I actually bought another book of hers. I think it's her autobiography. I bought it at the thrift store. I saw Sister Souljah. I was like, yes. I almost bought, I want to read her sequel, one of the sequels to this book, about Midnight, one of the characters, because he was really interesting. But it was the sequel to the first book in that, so I didn't pick it up. But I want to read. That's how much I like this book. I want to read that next part series. So we're following this girl, Winter. She is the daughter of, like, I don't know the terms, I'm sorry, I call him like the boss gangster. he's the big guy, he's the head honcho. He's running, I think they're Brooklyn, Manhattan, they're somewhere in New York. Don't ask me boroughs and names. I can tell you details about things and people, but I can't tell you their names. Anyways, so he's running things, and then he isn't. And we follow Winter as she was this really super privileged in like wealth. She had a lot of money and she didn't have to worry about money. As suddenly she has to start worrying about money and where to live and family, and it's also interesting because we're in her head, and she thinks she's like this super smart, like a typical 16-year-old, I know the world, I know how to run things, I've got everything planned out kind of attitude, and then like reality is like, nah girl, you have no idea. You have no idea. It was interesting. She also inserts herself into the book, Sister Souljah does, and that was my only gripe with it, is that kind of went nowhere. It was just kind of like she was there and then she was gone, and Winter didn't really learn anything from that experience, so it felt kind of pointless having that in there. Maybe it gets resolved in, I don't know if there's sequels with Winter, but yeah, that was the only downfall of it. But otherwise I enjoyed her writing. I really liked the juxtaposition of what Winter thought she was versus what she actually was. Then I read Mossflower by Brian Jacques, and this is a children's book. It's technically a prequel, but it's a second book. The chronology is all over the place in this series. I'm just reading it in the order that it was published. That's it. I don't care which book story comes first or not. This is the order of publication. That's the way that people read it when it first came out, so that's how I'm going to read it. So Mossflower is the second book published chronologically, but it's a prequel to the first book. Redwall is the series I'm talking about, in case I didn't mention that. So we follow a bunch of mostly rodents. There's mice, rats, hedgehogs, moles. This one has rabbits. I said I didn't know if there was rabbits, but I think the same page I read after they were saying that. There were hares, not rabbits, hares. Badgers. This one has a cat. 2 cats. Foxes. Otters. Stoats. weasels, eagles, those kind of things, in a medieval setting. And Mossflower is about this tyrant cat named Sarmina who wants to just make everyone slaves and work for her. And the group of small peasant rodents, mostly rodents, fighting back against her as Martin the warrior goes on another mission. It's fun. It's very violent and graphic for children. What I also like though is that Brian Jacques wrote it for blind children. He was telling them these stories, so the descriptions are very well done, and it's not just visual descriptions. Obviously, he talks about a lot about the food, the taste, the smells, the feel of things. So it's pretty cool in that way. Then I read my favorite book of the year, Swallowed by Rejean Ducharme. It's gonna be hard to top this book. I went through 2 sticky pads going through this book. I just really thoroughly enjoyed it. It's about, there's another juxtaposition in here that we have this 9-year-old girl, but her thoughts are not of a typical 9-year-old, but they're not mature enough. It's like you can have these feelings as a 9-year-old, but you can't put them into thoughts, and he's putting those feelings into thoughts. That's the way I'm going to describe it. So it's like an adult describing the feelings that she's having. Oh, that makes sense. So she's feeling the sense of alone and obsession over certain people and trying to break those obsessions or trying to get the other person's obsessed with her kind of thing. Yeah, it takes place post-World War II, but it was published in 1966, so I'm not too sure, that kind of era, but not too sure of the exact dates. Yeah, it is really good, and I don't know what else I can say about it. I'm going to open up. I have a video where I read the first chapter, or part of the first chapter, and that just kind of explained why this book stood out so much for me. Okay, I'm just going to read this. How can you forget that you're not alone? That Bernice and Christian aren't here, that they didn't do anything to you, that they're so young, so beautiful. You're not alone in your filth. Bernice and Christian are right there with you. They're in over their heads with you in that filth. It's about time you get a grip. Think of it. They're asleep. They've seen nothing yet. Think of it. They'll open their eyes and realize they're lying in filth, in your filth. Dear God, what a way to wake up. Spare them, you old freak. Yes, that's the mother talking. But that's kind of symbolic of the writing. And then I also read Pagan Christianity by Viola and some other dude. I just write one author on this list because it's too complicated trying to keep track of multiple authors. So this is about the origins of church practices, being mostly pagan in origin. Contrasting our current practices with the early Christian church for the first 300 years, how it was done, and how mostly because of the influence of Constantine and Rome, their influence on Christianity, and he talks mostly about the negative effects. I think I did have troubles at times. I was agreeing with him. I was like, yeah, I can see this, but could you also talk maybe about the more positive effects as well of these changes? Because this has been going on for 1700 years. Things aren't necessarily the same as they were in pagan times, right? In Roman times. So yeah, I just wish there was more unbiasedness going on in that book, because I felt like I was being lectured at. And I did agree with him. That was the thing. I was like, this is challenging some things that I thought before, but can we also do a little more balance here? So yeah, that's it for this second half of the wrap-up. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you think of them, and thank you for watching.